We have a very, very, very interesting panel, and we talk about, it's called CEO Table, as you probably have read. We are talking, but only with one CEO, but with one former CEO, and some great experts on the task, how to get research know-how into the corporate strategies. And very welcome, first of all, Gesa Miczaika, investor and former Vice President of the Startup Association. Gesa, welcome. Come to our panel. I warmly welcome Dr. Scheifele, the chairman of the advisory board of Heidelberg Materials. Brigl, well-known strategy consultant and head of Central Europe at the Boston Consulting Group. Welcome. And last but not least, Sölkner, CEO of the pharmaceutical company Pharma. Welcome, Mr. Sölkner. Welcome. Brigl, let me start with you as a strategy consultant. The first overview question always goes to you.
How many minutes do I have?
You only have 2 minutes. Okay. We have a short break after 45 minutes, so don't do the overall overview, please. Brigl, in a competitiveness report, Germany ranks only 23rd when it comes to the question how scientific findings, research know-how can be translated into business practices. Why are we so bad at this?
I think if we take a step back, I think these are the facts, obviously, how we translate science into business. But if we take a step back, the first question you can ask is how strong is actually our science? And I think our science is very, very strong and is very, very competitive compared to many other things in this country. So if we look at the other side of this report, 7 of the top 10 global research institutions are European. 4 of them are German. They have a budget of 10 billion. So this is well funded, this is top notch. So we have a strong asset in our research. So why is this not being translated? For me, the 2 main reasons why it's not happening, it's always a question of incentives, right? If you look into these research institutions and also on our academic institutions, the 2 main pillars were always about research and teaching, but not about commercializing. So I think we need to think through how we can actually focus also on commercializing this topic. And the second thing is, just if I look at the state where I'm from, I'm coming from Bavaria, I think it currently takes 18 months for IP generated in the universities to be translated into business. 18 months for an IP transfer. And I think these are just a couple of reasons why I think we are not seeing this amazing knowledge, this amazing know-how that is generated in this country being translated into business.
Interesting. Mr. Scheifele, what is your view on this unofficial, informal firewall between research and business practices?
I think what Michael just said, I would add one thing. I think he's totally right. The investment from a taxpayer point of view is immense. And the question is, what's the return? And obviously, if you look at the numbers, how many startups or venture capital companies come out of Max Planck and Fraunhofer each year, I think it's single digit. So it's a very small amount. The question is why. I think one issue is, an important one, is the IP policy of German universities compared to US institutions. Normally nowadays I come from Heidelberg, which is a very important healthcare cluster. There typically the IP in a very detailed contract belongs to the university. If you want to do a startup and transfer it, typically university takes a stake of very significant size, and that is then for venture capital a problem to invest. Whereas if you look to the US universities, some of them have the policy, we only take 5%. You know what? And then they get it much easier. I think that's one point, and the other point is obviously, as you said, there's a conflict of interest. Obviously, the people from Max Planck or Amber or Fraunhofer, they want to keep the best people for their own research and not let them go to the private side. But I would say, if I look back, and I'm an old white man, if I look back 20 years ago to Heidelberg, or if I look to Munich and also Berlin, I think Germany is moving. It's not the Chinese speed, But compared to 20 years, we are doing much better, and there's much more exchange and startup discussion, venture capital discussion between top research institutions and the business compared to 20 years ago. But obviously, we still have a lot of potential.
Obviously, Gesa, as a startup expert, it's a very little percentage of companies which are being founded out of the universities here compared to the US. Why is it so?
Well, for me, it's four things, actually. Number one is the culture. I think in Germany, we do have a culture problem of founding a company not being something that our children at scale see when they're young and see as a viable option for them. So for me, that would be one thing that we should address. Also, no school child, no university student should get out without having at least one touch point of founding. In some space, like even just talking to someone who has founded in the past. The second thing is financing. I think we do have a financing gap, especially in the growth stages. So even if you're able to, especially if you're a deep tech startup, and if you're able to get out of the university or out of the institute, then the financing is still an issue. In Germany, we do have venture capital in the early stages. We do have private equity companies, but the growth stage is something that we need to accompany the companies from really, really early stages to IPO stage, and that's something which we're not really good at yet. But we do have good initiatives. So if you look at the Deep Tech and Climate Fund right now, it's a good initiative. Or Sprint. They do financing of startups that usually would not get financing through the typical venture capital world. I think that those are good initiatives. And there's also really good initiatives from the industry itself. So from startup industry, we have several funds that work very closely together with universities. For example, we also have a venture capital fund coming out of a university. First Momentum is just one example, et cetera, et cetera. The third pillar, I would say, is market entry. So that, I think, is a little bit difficult so far. So what do I mean with this? It's companies working together with startups and helping them really to bring a marketable product into the market. And it's also the state that should be working a lot more together with startups to allow for this market entry. And regulation is, I would say, the fourth topic. So those...
We're going to talk about what politics and state regulation can do to change the system. But let me ask for Peter Sölkner, from your branch, the pharmaceutical branch, we have conducted groundbreaking research. The gene and cell therapy, for example, BioNTech is a good example. We invented, but the products are delivered from US companies, especially in this BioNTech, for example. Can you name examples and why is in your branch it's so obvious?
Yeah, so just to refer to your specific example, I think we all have still the pandemic in mind, and when we really tried to find a relatively quick cure with certain molecules based on mRNA technology, there were other things based on cell and gene therapy. It's more gene therapy with viral vectors, the AstraZeneca vaccine, for example, which was done between AstraZeneca and Oxford Biomedica in conjunction. But let's stick with two great German examples. So you had actually BioNTech and you had CureVac. Both of them were relatively advanced with the research of mRNA. mRNA was more geared towards oncological products, so to fight cancer to begin with. And then we had actually that grand idea, okay, we can come to a relatively quick outcome when it comes to vaccination. So here we have two pathways, both head-to-head, coming up with that technology, having, with the exception of a few linker technologies, almost the same approach, how to arrive at the conclusion. And then you had BioNTech making a great move there, teaming up with Pfizer at an early stage in the program, getting to clinic relatively quickly to be a fast mover, where CureVac, in my view, wanted to really do it all themselves. They went to Jens Spahn at that point in time.
Got 200 million.
They got 200 million. So they wanted to get as far as they could within the clinical phase, had a relatively broad approach. So what they didn't take into consideration that the virus was already mutating. So at the end, you had an outcome, you had a readout of 40, 50, 60% at best that it was doing something good, where BioNTech was well on its way. I think the lessons learned there is definitely you have to find a certain point where you have solid science and you take it from there immediately to the next step and don't lose time there. So the outcome is BioNTech, they're now going to different molecules, they buy monoclonal antibodies, then combination technologies, for example, mRNA, combined with, for example, prestigious drugs we already know from the oncology market, which could have even a positive effect. And they really invest their money in that direction and really had a fantastic commercial outcome as well, where CureVac is letting people loose and make people redundant at that point in time. It's just, if you read the press, it's no insider news. That's what's going on at that point in time with that outcome. Or sometimes in Germany, if I go 20 years back, cell and gene therapy is one of those topics where we don't have the end point in mind, and where we try to think big what we try to accomplish. I still have folks coming to us, reminds me of what happens 20 years ago, where it was good enough to hold a beaker full of drug substance really high at Wall Street and people would throw money at you. Yeah, so that is really the investment community, loves that. If we have that endpoint in mind, how do you get it really filled? How do you get to the patient? That is not the question any longer. And we had, for example, Knoll AG. They came up with a molecule, adalimumab. So it's known as Humira, one of the most prestigious drugs on the planet, north of $14 billion still to the day. And what happened? Knoll AG couldn't get it to a certain point, so needed more money. BASF had that pipe dream. Other than chemicals, maybe we can do something pharmaceutical. They bought it. They had no idea what to do with it. Sold it off to Abbott. And all of a sudden, it was really a pipeline in a product. 6 different indication classes. Most successful product until BioNTech came there, with their vaccine on the planet, and still to the day, double-digit billion revenues. So we, again, research in Germany, we were already at the point, who made the money? A US company. There's always that type of pathway that we don't really find that access to market quick enough.
Let me lay one point to BioNTech. I think that's a good example how in Germany, top research, which, by the way, didn't come from Max Planck or Helmholtz, it came from University of Mainz. That shows that the German 3-pillar system is really vibrant and is very strong, in my opinion. But you saw what was the success factor in BioNTech. You're totally right. It was a decision to team up with Pfizer, global #1 in big pharma. Who was a big decision taker in that? The Strüngmann brothers, the former owners of Exal, which I know are coming also from Pharma, from Ratio Farm. And it's very clear that the combination of world-class research and the entrepreneurship and knowledge of the Strüngmann brothers made BioNTech the big success. That was the combination of both, because the supply chain to manage this globally, that was a major issue.
So what can we learn from this example for the overall structure, Michael? We have the chain from patent to product, and where do we have to address who to change it? Is it the head of the universities? Is it the politics? Are the CEOs?
Yeah, I think for me, the first biggest learning is that we should stop thinking about concepts, but actually need to go into the execution stage. I mean, if you look currently, everyone is coming up with some kind of papers. Some of them have more impact than others in the last few days, but I think the concepts are all there, right? I mean, for me, the best example is look at Darty. Darty this is basically the agency for transfer that had the idea of actually for non-disruptive, more evolutionary technologies to actually build an ecosystem, a bit like you said, Gesa, that we need an ecosystem where we have partnerships in order to bring ideas into the business stage. This Darty concept was in the Koalitionsvertrag, so a couple of years back. When did it come into practice? 2 days ago. It was in the Bundestag.
Last week, yeah, right.
This is, for me, the biggest issue that we have. The concepts are on the table.
What is it, the politics doesn't want to do it?
We're too slow. We have all the ideas.
It's not priority, you say.
There are too many decision makers involved, and then if you just look like also like how we are organized, I think we have a governance problem on this topic. We have not. I think there is a need for an innovation agency. There needs to be someone on top that says, these are our priorities, and I know that you cannot run innovation management like a company, but at least you need to have some priorities, and you need to have some capital allocation, and you need to look at what is actually happening with this capital, to your point on, is there return on it? And I think we are not managing this properly enough. And I think my main point on this is we have the concepts, but we're not executing on them. Darty is, for me, a great tool in order to build an ecosystem, because it is exactly this ecosystem. When I speak to investors I met many on the West Coast, and I always said, like, what is the one single thing you look at when you look at a young company? And typically you hear, yeah, it's management, it's IP protection, and so on. And they said, like, no, for me it's, do they have a strong pilot with a large corporation? If they have that pilot in place, we believe that they can scale. And I think we need to build more bridges that these young companies can actually have these pilots in place. And I think this is this ecosystem build, I think, that we need to force. I think YouTube is on an amazing way. I think there we're starting to see this ecosystem happening and more companies coming in, because obviously you have scale effects. And I can see that there will be in Germany multiple YouTubes and where we have actually then critical mass and vibrant networks.
Can I add to that a little bit? Because I really like your point of saying that we have to work together. We have to get an ecosystem to do this together. And I think right now in Germany, we don't have enough partnerships with companies and startups. And I can tell you that our industry has become a lot more conservative since, the downfall. So having the revenue, having these pilots gives us the confidence, and that will help us, go the way. And who can do that? It's actually the industry. So it's the Mittelstand, it's the big industrial corporates who can do that. We have many startups in our portfolio that have that, and the follow-on funding is so much easier if they can say, my client is Stada, my client is BASF, whatever, like all of these, and it makes such a difference.
Yes.
But the BioNTech example, isn't it also a question of financial progress, of financial power? They chose Pfizer
They need to
because...
be pilots, paid pilots, definitely.
Yeah. But is it a question that state needs to be more engaged in the funding, or is it the regulatory for the second and third round of financing? How do we get these companies who have a good idea relatively soon to a partner who has the big money?
One of the other topics in Germany is definitely that you have to think about how do you get your investments or / cost to the balance sheet. In Germany, in pharma biotech, it is a cost. And if you're a startup and you need a really long breath to take a molecule from idea to market, so if you can't depreciate it as an investment, what you can do in the UK, what you can do in the US and other states, you have a big issue at that point in time. So that comes from, it's one of those roadblocks as well. But in terms of funding money, CureVac again, we're about 200 million. But that decision point with the Strongman brothers, with BioNTech to go to Pfizer at the right point in time, was a good one. For example, we have 220 projects in the pipeline, 70 of which are new molecular entities in our company. So what you see there is a typical game. We deal with the top 20 big pharma biotechs. They're all on the active client list with us. And usually their R&D machinery is ineffective as well, relative to the investment in pharma, big pharma and biotech, what they really put into research. The outcome is relatively minimal. Yeah? So,
You cannot compare pharma with the other industries. It's very established business models since years.
Yeah, no, but what happens is that they really acquire and in-license startups.
I would make a point. I think financing is one thing. I would also say Germany has come from my perspective a long way. But let's be realistic. Germany will never have the financial means like the West Coast or the US. That's just a question of our pension scheme. Yeah? That's the point. In US, it's asset-based. That's why they have to invest monthly all the contributions, whereas our contributions go immediately to the elderly. So, and we want to change that now step by step, but that's the fundamental issue. Yes. And big private pots of capital, like big family offices now also moving now into venture capital. That's a progress which has started and which will continue. But I think that's corporates also. We also, and I think let's look a little bit what you said, cooperation with corporates. I can talk about Heidelberg, what we have done. We are one of the big CO2 emitters of the world, obviously with cement. And we have set up already 6 or 7 years ago our own VC company here in Berlin, Fundamental. We have now the second fund and have to try to do that outside of our corporate structure with different people, different location, different KPIs. We have also tried to set up our own startups with our own young people. Then we have also participated in startup with young startup people where we then send our people in, but we haven't found the best way yet. What I want to say, the interaction between big corporates and startups is a difficult issue because mentality reporting. If the startup has a real interesting project, they do not want to have the big corporates in. They want to keep it for their own. The other investors look very critically at the big corporates and so on. So it's from a governance point of view, you have to look at every case, and it's all about people. And here to find the right mix is not easy.
You can join in, and you wanted to still. I'm just going to repeat your question for the live stream audience. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I think
we have a microphone. Perfect.
I think there's a big white elephant in the room. It says about innovation from research. I can only speak for biomedical research. About 60% of the published biomedical research is not reproducible. The shit hit the fan, as the Australians would say, when BioHealthcare actually had a department here in Berlin. Before they went into a development project, they said, well, let's reproduce the 8 or 10 most important papers that suggest gene A is relevant for disease B. And they published in Nature 78% of the papers that they try to reproduce are not reproducible. So let's face what really the problems are. There's a statistics from Ioannidis' lab from Stanford. He looked at 28 publications of the top 6 scientific journals. How many of those who said blah blah is relevant for disease B were actually tested clinically, were positive, were patented, were licensed? 1. So the problem we have in research is that the main incentives at our universities are publications, preferably in high-impact journals, which have a lower reproducibility rate than normal journals, and grant income. So spending money is a career criteria. No one measures in biomedicine, I don't know in any other area, what actually is applicable, leaving alone translatable to that. So we have a complete false incentive research structure in biomedicine.
Thank you, Herr Schmidt. A lot of nodding here. Yep. But how do we change this? What's your take on that, Peter, Michael?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for bringing that to the discussion. You're absolutely right. I didn't even know those harsh statistics. I didn't know that there is definitely merit to your point. But that's kind of shaking, if that holds true in that order of magnitude. So, but at any rate, in order to change that, the incentive system itself, combined with really the innovation culture, that you should be proud to fund something, that you really try to make it to market, that you see that as a career pathway, that's not how we define ourselves at our institutes. It's more about the research papers and so forth. By the way, China, interesting as well. In cell and gene therapy, the nation with the most publications in high prestigious magazines, over 9,000 last year. The US is a close follower with less than 5,000 in a couple of relevant magazines. How many big pharma biotech companies do you know in China making the top 50 on the planet? Not much. Almost nothing.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, but that's really the question. So if that holds true, what is it? What is really the merit behind that science? Where do we invest, and where do we really set the incentives? But I think that is might be hard to overcome. Really, to look for the right topics and to make it work on an industry scale.
No, but I think you were totally right to the point. But that's a political question. If you want to change the mandate of Max Planck, I don't know even if Berlin can do that, because they are a kind of separate Stiftung. Okay, Helmholtz is much more run by the government. You could change that. That we say we do not want to do basic research to make the planet a better place, but we want to also see that venture capital and whatever in Germany becomes a growing industry, and we have also an economic benefit beyond improving the life for mankind.
And
that's,
you probably
that's a hugely that's the key issue.
And you probably don't need to change it that dramatically, but it's about adding one or two other output-focused KPIs, right? I mean, this is what I said at the beginning. I mean, we're talking about research solely and about teaching, but we're not putting KPIs on what is the quality of the output from a purely commercial point of view. And I think that is lacking currently. So we're completely in blind flight. What is the commercial, from a commercial point of view, the quality of the research?
I agree.
Patient benefit, you know.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing, there was a study by Lakestar and McKinsey 2021, which showed that Germany, I think it was in second place in patents finding out new discoveries. And then at the end, it was at one of the last places in actually making marketable businesses out of that. So other countries do have it figured out. It's not only like the development of patents, which is the problem. It's more like what kind of patents are we developing? So the Innovation Agenda 2030 that the Startup Association brought out actually has two specific, I would say, calls to action. Number one is for universities and research associations like Max Planck and Fraunhofer and so on to have a budget of 1%, really brought into this focus of making marketable products and services from that. And the second thing is also when you bring in new professors, as you were saying before, Michael, there is right now it's Forschung und Lehre, so it's two pillars, as you said as well, to make the third pillar actually founding companies out of that, and bringing in professors that have a track record with that. So currently, it's only how many have you published? Thank you. Have you published it in a specific journal? Yes or no? Is your teaching really good? Yes or no? But having this third pillar as really one of the most important pillars, and then maybe bringing in different type of professors would be a great option. And I think TU München is one example, which I would say is really, really good. Also bringing patents from the university. Because you were saying 18 months it takes. Actually, in TU München, they have a fast track, 12 weeks of bringing IP from the university to the company itself. So I think there are many levers, but yeah, we have to tackle them.
Is it actually a political shift we are talking about in the priorities to reallocating the funds for Helmholtz and so on in universities away from pure research towards business-wise? I mean, we should have then more TUMs in the other states, right?
Sure. Definitely.
For sure.
Why isn't it not happening? Is it not a political priority? What is your...
It's actually the universities. So I was talking to Helmut Schönberger about that, and it's often the universities that didn't want it in the past. And I think, but the mind shift is happening right now, and they're seeing how successful in Munich the ecosystem is working. So I think a shift is happening right now while we're speaking. But
because
so
there's this mental border between Reinheit der Lehre and business practices at your campus.
Exactly.
Yeah, but even if you look at Germany, at our innovation clusters, I mean, it's not like that they're not present in the field. We have 128 innovation clusters. It's just it's part of our federal structure in a way, right? That there's a lot of duplication, and I think that is something I think where we probably need to think through. If you want to, particularly in deep tech, where you need big dollars for a long time at high risk, I think we need more concentrated hubs when you want to tackle space, when you want to tackle AI. And then we should not tackle it with 128 different centers and we're everywhere subscale. I think we need to also come to grips that who we're competing with, right? I mean, we're competing against the US and we're competing against China, and maybe even a German solution is obviously far too short-sighted, right? And for that, I think we need bigger hubs on these bigger topics, and it's all about larger cooperation.
Even go to the bio show, which is one of the biggest venues there, exhibitions on the planet for pharma biotech industry. So you see different countries presenting themselves there as one nation. What is Germany doing? 16 different booths for all the states, and then you have at least 50 different universities booking just a space, a little pop-up booth there, 1.5 meters, and just standing there, what can I do for you, kind of talk. And then a state secretary asked me once, why are you in the international pavilion with your company? I said, okay, take a step back, just join me here. Look at that. What do you think? But it's exactly that mentality, what you're saying, that we really should focus on a couple of things what we're really good at.
We have a couple of more questions here. First row at the right. Thank you very much.
Hi, I want to bring in a topic that hasn't been mentioned, which is people. So I'm in the States. I'm at the University of Chicago. I was a director of one of the national labs, Argonne. And in my experience, a big difference between what happens in Germany in physics, I'm a physicist, and what happens in the States is the fluidity of people going between universities, companies, national labs. In the States, it is very common for young researchers to leave the university system, to go out into business, to come back, to go into the labs. There is no negative association with moving between those different.
It's even encouraged.
And here, as you know, I'm actually German. I know it's very negative. It's viewed as a negative, especially at the universities. And I think that's a real problem here.
See negative from the academic side.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what
absolutely. Yeah.
But valid point. We are in the Illinois Science and Technology Park in Skokie, so where they have a cooperation with the Northwestern and so forth, for that very reason that there is fluidity.
Yes, exactly.
Can you hand over the microphone to the man in this third row, and then you at the front row.
Thank you. I'm coming from one of the fundamental research centers from CERN in Geneva. And that is part of physics. That is a science which is done by about 20,000 scientists, of which about the science puts into industry every year about 1,000 to 2,000 doctors, finished doctorates, which are qualified in a high-tech environment. But I all agree about your statement about people. People move from CERN to industry and back to CERN. That is easy. CERN is a European laboratory of a worldwide impact. But I wanted also to especially make a comment on the quality of the research. In particle physics, since 60 years, there's a group of about 1% of the whole scientists which looks at every paper coming out of that research, and every paper is put into a context. And it is peer-reviewed, such that there's a publication every 2 years giving the state of the art of that science. So at the moment, there's about more than 200 people doing this full-time, a full year, for full 2 years, and they keep changing. So the quality of the research is really something which is very important and is not the business of the politicians, but it's the business of the universities and the research institutes. And they should get organized on a worldwide scale. In particle physics, we do this worldwide. Everybody knows the particle data group, and everybody looks at their publications if they want to know where they are.
And I think that's a super interesting point, because, as you say, I mean, there is, I think that in many parts there's the quality there, but we're lacking as well then the connection to the industry and say, like, okay, what are now the next gen applications where we can actually bring this in? And I think this is where we're seeing grassroots of this in the universities. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Go ahead. Just another comment. I've been for some time responsible at CERN for knowledge transfer. I put it into being. That was in the year 2000. There is a lot of impact in the medical sciences, ionizing radiation for cancer therapy. About 1/5 of the world population can have such therapies. If you want to expand it into the whole population of the world, there's huge business. And we are working on that. We are actually making a device which can be commercialized, hopefully soon, such that you put it into any clinic and people can use it for cancer therapy, which will be important for many people. I know it's not gene therapy, but it's also one of the ways of healing cancer. So also these things are going on. And then the more than 1,000 scientists leaving CERN every year and going into industry, they are RCT knowledgeable. They can do almost anything. And
thank you very much. Next question here, the first row.
Thank you very much. Martin Ramel, Greencam Berlin, Tech Transfer and Spinouts in Chemistry from Berlin. I think it's all about mind shift, right? And here, when we look at industry, we can learn from big pharma. The other industries can learn from pharma because pharma has embraced external innovation. There are established concepts, there are established VCs, companies that fund research findings going towards pharma in the clinical phase 2 and 3, right? That's when big pharma comes in. So we can learn from that, and the incentive clearly is money, right? There is to be money earned with external innovation. And the mind shift, when we look at universities, that's more difficult, right? That's much more difficult. And here, if we look to Germany in specifics, there are two things. First of all, there's unclarity which ministry it is. There's BMBF, who's funding DATI, who conceptualized Exist, the biggest spin-out program, was taken away towards BMWK. And now if anyone is talking about startups, the BMWK comes and says, that's my business. Yeah, so there's no clarity. And then second of all, there's too much funding. There's orders of magnitude too much funding. We're currently investing approximately 100 million euro into the Lighthouse project that's currently underway. That goes for 5 years, so that's 20 million per year. And guess what? How much money is invested from those 20 million into spin-out teams? 0. It's all for the infrastructure, for the overhead, for supporting the teams. That is needed, yes. But if we want to unleash that wave of more spin-outs, of more tech transfer, who shall finance those early phase teams? You were talking about the gap in the later stages. Yes, clearly, how to make that possible without a capital-based pension fund, right, which we don't have. That's difficult. But we are also, about the early phases, they're not financed enough. So shifting money from research to transfer, I think, is something we should debate in the upcoming months and weeks, which yesterday you've been at Markus Lanz, right, when Mr. Habeck said, oh, next time we talk about innovation capabilities, let's talk about that.
Let's not start with clarity at the Bundesregierung, and that's another panel, I think, one room further. Can we have the last question here in the first row? We're running out of time, but this young man raises his hand.
Thank you. My name is Sebastian Henschke from Jena. I do tech transfer with startups and through startups in the field of optics and photonics. And actually, you just presented it on the table a bit, Martin. I think we're talking a bit too much about money and too much about infrastructure and too much about financing and so on. We have to talk more about the people actually doing stuff, execution, and these are founders. And it's people founding companies. And we are focused on the wrong people, on professors. Let's focus on PhDs and postdocs. They are the ones doing the stuff. And I mean, you know, they decide, will I stay in academia or will I go out? And that's the toughest questions for them, because most, if you're a postdoc and you've done your PhD for 5 or 7 years and then another 5 years in a lab, actually switching, but is a big deal. because you're losing and you're leaving your community, your home base. But there are people doing it. And let's learn from them, because they are the power people, I would say. They are pushing the transfer. And I think they are too often left out of the equation.
100% right. 100% right. I've seen actually successful startups. What happened is that usually professors still in the background, but lets those people do stuff and backs them up, is maybe somewhat vested in the whole project and is okay with that. But that's exactly right, to make that shift, that you get out of academia and let these people run the show. Yeah.
Thanks for this very vital discussion. We are having some extra time, so I don't have to close now. So we're getting in this. I can't see you, but there's a question back there. Thank you very much.
Stefan Grosselbeck.
Hello.
Good to see you. Good morning.
It's the light. I didn't recognize.
I know. It's good. I want to make 2 comments. One comment is, let's be careful not to start bashing basic research. Right? I mean, basic research has been kind of the starting point for human progress for centuries, and it's, by the way, also a Grundfreiheit, right? Forschungsfreiheit. Let's not start bashing basic research. This is not about kind of reducing one to the benefit of the other. I do believe, however, we have, in the way we our research system, the way we fund research, the way we evaluate research, the way you make a career in research as a young scientist, we do have a bias towards the basic research in the way we evaluate, in the way we fund. And that's exactly where initiatives like Dati and others come in, to place equal value into the application of research, in the way we fund, in the way we evaluate, but most importantly in the way we enable young people to make careers. So if we can get over that bias, create the fluidity between systems, as was mentioned earlier, I think that's a big lever which we have, or which we need to pull. It will take, however, many years before we get there. So the question is how we kind of fund the way to get there. But I think that's where we need to go to.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Nobody's bashing here anybody, but I guess the shifting money and mindset parts from basic research to transfer is still one big challenge. Gesa, what do you think? How can we go on constructive in the next couple of months? I know we don't have a Bundesregierung at the moment, but we will have another one soon somewhere. What are the for the last round? What are the two, three tasks where we have to go political-wise, regulatory priorities?
Good question. I think making it just easier to found a business and bringing it into the heads culturally, bringing it into the heads of all our children. That's, for me, the biggest lever. It's making founding a business just really like a normal thing, which right now is still not the case. And having researchers go from research to starting a business, going back to research, totally possible because it's a positive thing, having been in a startup.
Bernd, Scheifele, your wish list for the next Bundesregierung?
2 points. I think what we need beyond what Michael said in Germany, we have to review our federal structure with federal government, countries, and then communities, and on top we have the EU, and these 4 levels make us highly inefficient. So we have to become, as a country, more efficient. That applies obviously also to research. On the research output, which goes more to industries, I'm a strong believer in the 3-pillar system of Germany, but I think we should be very pragmatic and look very closely whether we can do more with Fraunhofer Institute, which is typically very close to business. And the question is, what's the output of Fraunhofer on startups every year? That should be significantly higher than that of Max Planck. I don't know the numbers, I'm from a corporate, but I think that's something where I would immediately start looking at.
Michael?
Yeah, very good points. Don't want to repeat them. For me, the big thing is I would fully focus on execution. I would say, and for me, the biggest lever in the transformation is always taking bureaucracy out, because it doesn't cost anything. That's the beauty of it, right? I would look at the 10, 15 biggest processes in the startup universe and would say, let's half it. Let's do it in half the time. Let's use that as a starting point, because I think we are still, I think our biggest issue is not about concepts, it's about the speed in execution, and we need to become faster.
Peter?
Yeah, so definitely. definitely agree with that. So less federalism, focusing on centers of excellence, even if it is really forgoing some of those other universities there or professors who would love to be at the forefront. I think we have to focus on a couple of things. And then on the other hand, let's not forget about development in this country. So research is one piece where it goes deep down. So we make our money, and I think we play in the Champions League with our companies there, with development. We have, for example, Packaging Valley, where you can buy the best packaging machines on the planet. It's around Karlsheim. You find 4 or 5 companies. If you need one in the pharmaceutical industry, you go to the Karlsheim environment. So let's focus on a couple of those things. It's about development as well, to make things better, to make things perfect, to support it with some of the topics we know from the universities, from the base research, which is very important, fully agreed, but then really to get to commercial, there's that development piece where we are a CDMO, contract development manufacturing organization. Yeah? So there are a couple of really good ones in Germany, and they're good engineers, and how to get really with the endpoint in mind to market. And really not think it really from the research piece, and maybe we can do one day something with it. Really think about it, what do you want to be in the market?
We have a question back there. Yes.
Thanks. I would like to bring in the experience from a founder who has exactly done this. And so we are a company, we have transferred IP from university to a company. We are meanwhile 80 people. I have founded with a professor. We have many PhDs in postdocs in our company. What we are struggling with, and I've founded other companies before, is really bureaucracy. And you pointed out many right things. First of all, we need a culture in Germany of entrepreneurs. We need to have the culture of allowing to fail. That is not in our culture. And our company is based in Germany and in the US, and it's very different in the US. So people, we don't have enough entrepreneurs. Next thing is, if we have entrepreneurs, we have too high bureaucracy. The way to found a company, to get IP transferred, to get a company set up is way too long and way too complicated. And the next step is the amount of money that is available. We are a deep tech country in Germany. We have founded deep tech 100 years ago and more. We have engineers, we have all the knowledge here, but we speak about ridiculous amounts of money. What we need is really an existing structure for getting deep tech financed, and deep tech needs a lot of money early on, and that's what we also have to change, which means we have to open up endowment funds, retirement funds for innovation. That's the difference that we see in the US, and that provides money that we don't have.
Thank you very much. Some of the answers for your question are really within the Innovation Agenda 2030, which I really recommend. And there's a podcast, by the way, who's covering this topic, very good, called Table. Anyway, last question. Last question. This young fellow from Munich here in the first round. Do we have a microphone? We have only 2 minutes left, but he was raising his hand for minutes now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we heard a lot about bureaucracy, and I just wanted to point out that there is actually a petition going around. It's called the EU Inc. petition, and the idea is to create one European-wide type of legal entity that all startups could use with minimal bureaucracy. I just wanted to point out that petition is still going around. I encourage everybody to sign it. It's a fantastic thing. And actually, if that's okay, I would have a question also.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so my question is, so in the very beginning of the discussion, we said it would be fantastic to have like pilot projects with larger companies, and it kind of felt like this was like almost like a charitable thing to do for the companies, and nothing could be further from the truth, right? I mean, this is the innovation pipeline. This is your outsourced de-risking that you can do. The only thing that you need to have as a company, as a corporate, is you need to have the right risk appetite to buy from a company that might go out of business in 2 years, but it might also be the next BioNTech. Imagine if Pfizer had said, look at BioNTech, these guys are so small, we don't care about them, like we're not going to buy from them. That would have really changed the world in a negative way. So what can we do to increase the risk appetite of larger corporations to actually buy from startups and, you know, get all that juicy upside?
Very good question. Who wants to answer? Last chance. Mr. Scheifele is...
You're doing it already.
He's already doing it.
I would say less risk awareness or consciousness, and also less bureaucracy, because the big corporates have to disclose whatever, supply chain check and whatever, and that makes life very difficult. That means in big corporates, if you look to board work, they concentrate very much on compliance and ticking the boxes, but the discussions about the real entrepreneurial issues on supervisory board level is disproportionate to the other points, because it's all ticking the boxes. I'm out of responsibility. We have here a second opinion from the lawyer, have here a third one from the auditors, and have everybody checked that. Okay, we're relieved, the company will go on, but on the key topics is not enough time, and that's all the question of all this bureaucracy over regulation. German Corporate Governance Codex started with 30 pages. I think in the meantime it's 300. It's all nonsense. What? That's the reality.
Thank you very much, Bernd, Scheifele. Next year we're going to have a session called Bureaucracy Table, Falling Walls. Falling Walls. Makes sense. Thank you very much, Gesa, Miczaika, Bernd, Scheifele, Michael Brigl, and Peter Sölkner. Vielen Dank. Thank you very much.